It's Tool or Die. Alex, where are you?
I'm enjoying the pinnacle of American culture and Las Vegas for the Manifest conference, which is good, which is cool. Lots of friends here. Then you can leave the conference anytime and go off the strip and just check it out. Can we please not go there, please?
All right, maybe we should talk to our guest, Phillip Swanson. Your title, it's Head of Venture Development and Investment at Centrepolis Accelerator. I'm going to start with a very basic question, and it's not because I'm stupid. It's because our audience is stupid.
Oh my
just
God.
Kidding. I'm just kidding. How would you frame the difference between an accelerator versus a traditional VC?
Yeah, so the biggest difference between an accelerator or venture studio, which is where we're kind of modeled more after, and a traditional VC is we do more than just put capital into a company. So when we meet an organization, we put our in-house engineering, design, and manufacturing support behind the companies we believe in. So typically we're more risk on than a lot of early stage VCs and other VCs who want to look at a company and say, I don't understand the technical piece. I don't understand maybe some of these risks, so I'm not going to invest. I'm going to wait till there's more product market fit and some scale up. And so that's traditionally been the big gap in hardware is there's not enough risk capital going into companies early, especially in the industrial and hard tech sector, where a lot of the VCs who made their money in B2B SaaS and these other sectors just don't understand the things that go into hard tech development. So our CEO, Dan Radomski, saw a big gap in that marketplace, said, hey, how can we help founders, actually get to the point where they are investable and investment ready and scaling out their production. So that's where we come in with our internal expertise, a lot of our non-dilutive funding, and help companies, scale their design, engineering, and manufacturing to the point where they're getting pilots with a lot of our corporate partners and other entities in the Midwest that we have good relationships with.
Well, you guys are part of Lawrence Tech.
Yes, correct. Yeah, so we sit alongside Lawrence Technical University. We get to all the benefits of great engineering school, a lot of talent that comes in. That's much more inexpensive. When it comes to running some of our fellowship programs in the summer. On top of our in-house expert engineers, which a lot of them have 15, 20, 30 years of experience and oftentimes are kind of in their second win. They were engineers at some of the top companies in Michigan and across the Midwest. And one of the benefits too with Lawrence Tech is they gave us a ton of autonomy, where a lot of other, education-based accelerators have like really strict ties and there's a lot of influence in the decision-making and who we work with. It's a lot more low touch because we don't get a ton or basically no funding from a dollar perspective. We get space and equipment access. So that gives us a lot of autonomy and then a lot of the benefits of being able to essentially mine university capabilities, faculty, students, and then also apply for grants, as a prime in that application process, with corporate partners and startups so that we can win DOD, DOE, and other federal grants.
You talk about focusing on a lot of folks who come up in traditional manufacturing, much of which is out of the Midwest. That's kind of your background too, isn't it?
Yeah. So, I'm born and raised in Michigan, grew up in a small sleepy beach town called Grand Haven, about 30 minutes west of Grand Rapids. And then I went to school in Kalamazoo, played football down there, and then got a first job out of college after I got my master's was with Whirlpool Corporation. And I stayed there for almost 10 years, working in different parts of the organization. Started out, oddly enough, in our field service department, where I was developing and training materials and technical videos and technologies to help our field service technicians service appliances better. So I got a real early feel for like when something wasn't engineered properly and we're doing teardowns of product and we're using 20 different screws to put a washing machine together, you kind of raise a lot of red flags that the technicians don't like that. Hey, there's got to be a better way to design this. So I quickly got into kind of the product design engineering side of the business, working in our advanced innovation and development groups, including a group called W Labs, where we were bringing new to the market innovations, like a home composting unit, home brewing unit. I actually worked in beer for about 2.5 years, so made a lot of beer. Basically, everyone was really jealous of us, and every Friday when we were trying to just give away beer out of the kegs that we had, people came over and had the keezer, and we were just filling up tons of bottles and things like that for people to take home on the weekends for a couple of years. So it was a lot of fun.
hold on. I want to stop you because I want to know. I want you to break all your NDAs. I want to know about I want to know about if you are Whirlpool, you make washing machines. That's what everybody knows you for. What does an innovation lab actually look like?
Wow. So there's a ton of. So it's funny because we had in W Labs the focus was things that weren't core to the business, right? What are those new potential markets? So a lot of like you said, we had a composting machine called Zara that we launched. We raised a bunch of money on Indiegogo. I helped lead that launch, really successful. And then we ended up killing it. And then all of our competitors had a lot of success launching their versions of it. Typical corporate, kind of innovation where you were a little bit early, didn't have the long game in mind, and then everyone else fixed the minor mistakes that you knew you had to fix. We had the home brewing side, and then there are a bunch of other projects that were starts and stops, right? So we had like hand-powered washing machines that are now like a nonprofit part of the business where we make these and like donate them. They still donate them to developing nations, all the way to what we call it disaggregated chemistry work, which there's probably projects still going on that, which is like the holy grail of cleaning. All right, so being able to take your kitchen industrial cleaning and bring that in-house to, we were doing high heat pizza ovens before everyone else was. So there's a lot of things where we were leading the market, a lot of internally, and then you just end up not launching it. Well, that happens at every company, right? A lot of that stuff gets killed. And the one thing that we were really trying to lead and figure out was how do you do small scale flexible manufacturing? And we actually built on site for Vessi, which was the home brewing appliance, our own small little manufacturing line off the back of our Benton Harbor Technology Center. And we actually produced about 300-400 units through that. And UL certified that space to do, I think, up to 1,000 a year. So we got a special designation to get UL certification, had to go through that whole process with them so that we could do some small scale flexible manufacturing. And that was ultimately what we were really going after, is how do we build systems to actually support innovation faster, that that the business can care about something instead of having it be a 1 million unit run of a new dishwasher, washing machine, or dryer, to hey, we actually could potentially make money off of making 1,000 of something initially. Well, we weren't as successful internally as we wanted to be, and that's a large part of why I started going into this early stage market and looking externally of how do we bring innovation into the business. And then started supporting startups and early stage companies and realized there was something here, that, my experience, and, started connecting with Dan, our CEO, and others to say, hey, there's a lot of us that think very similar, that we can take this expertise we learned, all the mistakes we made in industry from a manufacturing perspective, and we can educate and help early stage founders avoid all those mistakes, especially in hard tech where the capital is so expensive and the timelines can be so intense and long. Where if you make a mistake, it's not just going back and being like, oh, I can iterate on some code, I can push a new update to my application. Right, I spin up another AWS instance. It's, oh no, I over-capitalized on a tool, on something. I spent the money in the wrong place, and it can kill my company. And so we said, okay, how can we help reduce that risk and increase the number of companies that have the potential, or at least give them the potential to succeed?
Do you think it's possible for the extant American large manufacturing companies to do in-house pivots and relaunches at this point? Or do you think, and is this why you're now at an accelerator, that this is largely going to be 0 to 1 development for the next wave of American manufacturing?
So one of the kind of core beliefs Dan and I both share is that the reason a lot of your small mid-tier manufacturers don't innovate, it's more of a capacity versus a capability perspective, that they don't have the in-house engineering, or they don't have the time or the capital, but they have an idea. And so one of the things we do is we don't just focus on early stage companies that are new to the world. We also enable small, medium enterprises, and even some of our established large firms, to test and de-risk some of these things they wouldn't normally. But I do agree, and one of the reasons I got out of large industry is being an ambidextrous organization, the organization that can, essentially capitalize and extract value from your existing business units and grow those, and then innovate and disrupt. Like that is a unicorn, right? Not many of those organizations exist. It's really tough to point to ones that are persistent. You have some that might be good right now, or there might be examples like, You could look at like Stanley Black & Decker did that for a while, but then they shut down a lot of those business units in the last few years. So it comes to the quarterly returns and those ebbs and flows of, public industry. You have too many shareholders and others that expect you to perform and don't necessarily give you that good grace to disrupt yourself. Some businesses are great at it, and there've been some great examples. Whether you look at Amazon with AWS, but those are very rare kind of unicorns. And so part of what we're looking to do is potentially enable those small, medium manufacturers who want to explore or have an idea, the ability and the space to do that. And more importantly, where we spend most of our time is with those early stage companies, because ultimately those are going to be the firms that are going to disrupt others and bring new technology into some of these spaces.
So these companies, like Whirlpool or the equivalent, who don't have the bandwidth internally to innovate, how many of them have successfully set up like an investment or venture arm that would go looking for externally for what they can't do? And are they calling you to navigate that?
Yeah, so we actually work with a number of corporate venture capital firms. A great example of like a best-in-class institution is Avery Dennison, right? They are probably one of the premier manufacturers of RFID tags and other logistics and supply chain. They're probably at out in Las Vegas right now this week. But they invest early and often into this space, and they actually have spun up entire new business units on the backs of some of those innovations. Like an example, they invested in a company called Wiliot, or Will IoT, however you want to pronounce it, an Israeli firm that has a battery or energy harvesting Bluetooth tag, right? So it can essentially harvest over their energy, without a battery and transmit data. And they invested them super early, like 2017, 2018, and built an entire logistics side of their company around that core technology and the platform that Wiliot ended up creating. So those are companies that they see the opportunity early, they use it as a sensing mechanism, and then they have kind of the internal capabilities to say, hey, I've identified an opportunity. Can we spin up a business unit, see if it's successful, and build it out? But again, those are very rare. I mean, you have BMW iVentures, which is another good example. And then one that's really close to home that just started, UFP. They're essentially a construction tech company out of Grand Rapids. They have a new venture arm that's based out of Michigan. They're only a year and a half old, and they've already wrote, I think, like 6 or 7 checks. All right, so they're moving really fast. So there's a lot of great examples of companies using corporate venture capital as a way to sense the market and be really fast. There's also a lot of examples of corporate venture capital doing really poorly, right? Being what they call dumb money, right? Like coming in, spending too much money, overvaluing a company, and then even crippling a company because they have some weird onerous investment terms. We've seen that too. So we try to be really good stewards of who we work with based on how we know they operate. And then also help our startups navigate that to know, hey, who are the good stewards on the corporate side? Who do you want to have on your cap table versus who don't? Because, they talk, startups talk and other investors talk.
What advice would you give to a company that is looking at possibly raising from a corporate venture arm? How to gauge the good from the bad? Like what are the red flags?
I think the red flags are if they want to know too much about your technology too early. Without actually showing you a term sheet, so that becomes a company that's more just looking for insider information. And you have groups like Amazon, which have gotten a lot of flack for that. Kind of using investment arms as a way to see technology and then all of a sudden create their own version of it and kind of crush competition before it's there. So that's a red flag. I would also say look at their investment history, and then talk to people who have them on the cap table. And reach out and do a little bit of your own due diligence. And the good corporate capital, you want to have some good strategics that can be, partners either on a technology side, maybe they're filling a gap that you have, and they can be eventually, you can be a customer of them, but also who are you potentially going to sell into? ZX Ventures out of AB InBev is a great example of a firm that, started, and their whole thesis was, we know these very unsexy spaces in logistics, supply chain, warehouse operations, all of this stuff around essentially moving water, right? Because that's what, all they do. They move water all over the world. How do we make that more efficient? And if we can find those companies, we'll be their first customer, and they have a great chance to succeed. And we're going to introduce them to all our friends, So that first check we write, they're going to raise money off the backs of all these contracts. So we're going to have, a good investment, no matter what. And so they built a really good, kind of practice. And a lot of that talent has started their own firms. Like Luke Charrington has started his own firm, out in Colorado called, Latitude Ventures. They're absolutely amazing. And he took that thesis and now he just runs that same playbook, but outside of AB InBev.
Our general advice for people, for our the companies that we advise, is that a corporate investing arm will almost never invest in anything that they do not see fitting into their supply chain or customer base in the future, which sounds very obvious, but I think it's funny coming out of the Valley style where there's a lot more exploratory investment that there needs to be that correlation, but it's pretty universal. Centropolis, you guys are playing largely defense, climate tech, recycling, and industry in general. Like where are you seeing the biggest increase over the last 6 to 12 months in those sectors? Where are you guys seeing some heat?
Yeah, so we've seen, kind of three big trends. One, we talk about like industrial decarbonization, or what we say is operational efficiency when it comes to industrial operations. So that's, meaning that, yes, reducing your greenhouse gas footprint and all those things are great for the environment, but it's also great for the bottom line. So we're seeing tons in the long duration energy storage, grid optimization, high heat electrical applications. So turning all these gas power processes into electrical processes. We've won some grants, with some of the startups we work with on that. So we have some projects where we're electrifying, large scale curing ovens and using like laser diode technologies to apply heat in what we're calling a cold furnace, which is a lot of fun, right? So your powder coating and your ceramic enamels and things of that nature are applying energy at the surface. The second trend you talked about, defense, is we're seeing a ton in the defense sector, which applies across industry because it's really around advanced materials, powered electronics, lightweighting, and reducing our exposure to essentially critical supply chains and technology gaps. So, because there's a huge risk with China and other, non-blue nations, who own most of the refining and production capacity for lots of critical minerals and materials, including rare earth magnets. We want to be able to create resilient supply chains and don't rely on that. So we've got companies in our portfolio like Modal Motors, which is, developing an interesting motor technology that doesn't use rare earth minerals, materials, or magnets. They even have a disposable motor technology that's essentially plastic-based for single-use drones. Imagine your forward-facing drones and kind of your one-use, single-use attack drones, right? So we're seeing a lot in that space. And then in the kind of the powered electronic space as well. So this is more mobility focused, energy transition, battery. So not only the battery chemistry, which everyone's going after, it's all of those other systems that are becoming more efficient. So we have companies like Merrill Power in our portfolio, which is using a best in class inverter stack that's got great packaging, smaller packaging, higher efficiency on the power conversion. And so what we're really kind of focusing on is where do all of these kind of three different themes fit together for us? And then that transfers into the industrial side where we get into industrial automation and robotics, which we're always playing in, right? That's like that persistent underline of like, how do you improve operations? How do you make those things more efficient with those autonomous systems? And we see a lot of pull in that automation space, which, everyone wants to say AI is going to take over the world. Well, there's some very human things that AI is just really bad at. Like we were on a call this week around material handling for apparel and garments. And if you've ever watched a robot try to like literally fold a t-shirt, let alone sew a t-shirt, right? Or sew seams, it's like the most comical thing in the world, right? And we have a great institute in Detroit called Isaac that's at the forefront of all this. And we still haven't automated a lot of these processes efficiently. So there's a ton of interesting areas to play, but we're seeing it really in those three kind of key areas around defense, powered electronics, and industrial optimization.
When you brought up Whirlpool, all I could think about was these. We can't curse in this show, can we, Joe?
We shouldn't. I can beep you.
These fucking stupid videos that you see on CNN or other. It's like about innovation, and like a few years ago, there was somebody brought to the Consumer Electronics Show this machine that would wash and fold your laundry. And they had a plastic thing you could see through with a Rube Goldberg contraption of arms that would extract the laundry from the washing machine and fold it. I looked at that thing and I'm like, there's no amount of money you could pay. You couldn't give me that thing for free and put it in my house. The maintenance on the machine would be awful.
In the near term, whether it's humanoid robotics or any other type of robotics, AI impacted, it's not supply chain, manufacturing line work is going to happen, but it's not near term. Like, we're just not there yet.
And it depends on your definition of AI. I mean, one of the first applications of any machine learning program is industry optimization, right? Like, we've been using it for automated inspection for decades at this point, like 15 years. Machine vision systems have been a thing for so long. And so we've constantly seen that kind of improvement. It's very funny to me when I've had a number of, I would say, Valley-esque or Valley-adjacent companies that have kind of come across our desk showing technologies of things that like we've seen in the field and that are actually operating at facilities just because they don't know the industry. And so they're doing this customer discovery and learning really quickly that, oh, what I thought was this innovative, skeletal tracking piece for optimization and all of it, like no, this has been happening for a while. Like your best companies in the world are doing this every day.
Customer discovery is such a wonderful euphemism for disappointing pain and loss of seed capital.
Exactly. The $500,000 they got to go discover this technology, and they realize, oh, I'm going to have to I'm going to be an engineer somewhere else.
Among these sectors in which we will need to reindustrialize and reshore, or like, which are getting the least attention from founders and seed investors that you'd like to see more of?
Wow. All of them, but I think honestly, maybe you talk about, I'm looking at like a quick little graph I have here of how our ecosystem in action. And so when we talk about powered electronics and like, those spaces, right? All of the things that go into the system architecture, right? Those are the things that concern me the most when we look at like drones and others. There's this huge gap. Everyone's kind of trying to do something in this space, but they don't understand the supply chains well enough, right? So you're talking from your motor controllers to your actual motor design to your flight controllers. We're doing some studies with the University of Michigan and some other commissioned work right now, and it's wholly apparent that if China cuts us off, right, the U.S. just doesn't have access to those critical components to actually produce drones, whether they're commercial drones here for crops or just consumer drones for video and others. Like, they just don't exist anymore for us. So those are some that kind of I think everyone knows about, but we're not doing enough about fast enough. And then I would say maybe some of the non-sexy things. You talk about supply chains and logistics and some of the other just movement of materials. Are there different ways for us to optimize that? Everyone wants to look at mobility and like big rigs and all of these other things. Is there a way for us to reinvent what the rail system looks like, reinvent the way our ports are operating, reinvent some of these big industries that can have really big downstream effects, for our reindustrialization and make it cheaper to make products here. But at the end of the day, there's certain things that we're just not going to be able to make here in the States. Like, at the end of the day, we have to realize that and make sure that we have good partners globally to fill those gaps.
There's been some, it's at best like Twitter level chatter and debates, but there's been some talk about, should we build a Shenzhen of the United States? Should we locate one sector or state or city where we're really heavily industrializing something? Or should we continue to do what we've been doing for the last 50 or 60 years, which is to have pockets of industry across the country? Do you have any thoughts on that, especially living in Michigan, which at a certain point in history was the Shenzhen of the United States?
So I live in Kalamazoo, Michigan, right? And within like literally an hour drive in a circle of this city, we have 70 foundries, right? I mean, we have like the space exists in the activating that network. You just don't have the density of a Shenzhen, right? You're not going to have 20 million people and me be able to essentially move down the street in a supply chain to hand parts off, right? There's going to be a disconnect. But also we have to understand like the amount of time it took to create that, right? And also the incentives to create that are different, right? If we were to do that, do people really want to work in a factory for $10 an hour their entire lives and not make a livable wage, right? That's just not, we'd have to create some sort of automation, right? And so, not every factory in Shenzhen is like Foxconn, right? And even Foxconn has varying degrees of automation across their systems.
Yeah, I mean, Foxconn is among the best.
Yeah,
in Shenzhen. Yeah,
exactly. And so, like, you go through, if you've ever walked through a Foxconn facility, you're just like, this is amazing, but also it's like it's very almost like dystopian, right, in the way that it feels. And I love working with their teams over the years, but trying to replicate that here, like, there's just a difference in culture, a difference in expectations in terms of how you execute that. And I think for us, the ability to leverage small scale, kind of flexible manufacturing that I've talked about kind of previously, that's a real superpower for us, right? So if I am in, in Michigan here, and you need to build 1,000 of something, and I'm in the Kalamazoo area, I can go do that, right? But also I can go then build one of something over on the east side of the state with some of their high performance, prototyping and fab shops, with a bunch of 3D printed parts. And then I can also build 100,000 or 1,000,000 of something. And you kind of miss that in some places where it's, I don't want to talk to you to build one. And unless your order and your piece number is over 100,000, like, don't talk to me. So we can really, double down on that, like, kind of mid to small market, and have a bunch of innovation coming out extremely fast to figure out what's the right thing to scale up and double down on, versus, which I think with the Twitter manufacturing space is like, we need to go big and hit this home run, which is great. But what if you're wrong, right? You've now built a city that no one wants to live in. You've got a bunch of boxes that are only built for one use versus, kind of that smaller modular piece. So yeah, I'm less inclined to say we need to copy Shenzhen versus we have to figure out what our own path forward is and leverage the strengths of, what this U.S. dynamism can be.
Having lived in Michigan myself, and having worked in Michigan, more importantly, there is a history of manufacturing that for a lot of reasons did get exported. And some of those reasons were because the jobs were dirty, dangerous, and didn't pay as well as they could have. And this is a deep topic as far as unions and all of that stuff. Where did that part fall apart? However, there was wisdom and insights and experience that a lot of the Valley type thinking and the pure innovation disruption thinking just wasn't aware of. And you saw the culture clash. But the flip side was there were a lot of people, in my experience, coming from the Midwestern Michigan manufacturing standpoint, that said, well, you don't understand how hard it could be. We couldn't do it. And then somebody would. So what is your experience as a Michigander, as an advocate for the Midwest, all of those things? Where is that disconnect happening, and how do we move past it? Because ultimately, I feel like both sides are going to have to unify for us to be able to figure out this next wave of industry.
Yeah, there's a lot of not invented here syndrome, right, in the Midwest in these companies, where it's, oh, we can't do that because we didn't do it, and then someone else comes and eats their lunch, right? And so how do we get past it? We've seen it in Michigan, even regionally. Like, you spend any amount of time in Michigan, you go from Detroit to Kalamazoo to Grand Rapids to Traverse City, it feels like 4 different, states sometimes. And so I think what we need to do is kind of take those strengths, right, and amplify each other, not be as regionally, I want to say, selective, and kind of create these little fiefdoms that exist. And Michigan's come a long way, since, I've been involved in the ecosystem and playing well together. And, we at Centropolis have kind of been, very good stewards of what we do well in Southeast Michigan, right? We know hard tech and we know how to do this, and we can export that to the rest of the state. But also we realize there's some really great capabilities in Grand Rapids and around the corridor where I live here in Kalamazoo that don't exist in Southeast Michigan. And so I think for us regionally and across, the country is, okay, taking what each of these regions do really well and understanding that we're not in competition as much as we are supposed to be complementing each other with these capabilities. And I think the part that you're getting at here is, okay, why did everything export? Why have we not been as quick to change? And I think it's because everyone's viewed it as kind of the zero-sum game. versus, okay, it's us versus them from a company perspective versus, okay, we really need to understand, hey, what's best for us in our region, what's best for us across the states, and collaborate in a better fashion, realizing that there might be some sacrifices that have to be made, from region to region. And, Detroit's not going to be the best at everything. Grand Rapids isn't going to be the best at everything. Chicago's not the best at everything. And realize, okay, where can we, position founders, right? Because I'm focused on the early stage. Where can I position a founder in that ecosystem in the right space versus being very competitive and kind of selective and saying, okay, he's only going to work, or this individual, he or she's only going to work in my area, right? Because I want them to be successful for me. Versus like, hey, this person should go to M-Hub. This person go to Spark Innovation down to Tennessee. This person should go over to Pittsburgh to the ARM Institute. So there's a ton of opportunity for us to be, more complementary and collaborative, so that we can leverage those, key unique capabilities versus kind of hoarding resources and assets.
Earlier you mentioned American Dynamism, which was a great brand for the concept behind it. Now, for a long time, there was in Silicon Valley pushback at companies like Google from engineering staff who did not necessarily want to work on technology that was defense or dual use. And I'm curious to know if you've seen issues with talent and hiring across your portcos due to politicization of defense. And then if you see what you've seen from investors regarding reluctance to go into defense or just dual use.
Yeah, so you're seeing a little bit of bifurcation on the investor front. So you've got some investors that are all in on defense and dual use, right? That's their whole portfolio thesis. They're going in after really big and hard. And some of those, may not be the best at understanding some of the different technologies they're investing in, because it's a little, like you said, they maybe almost have politicized the dollars. But what we're seeing on our portco side is, a lot of companies are realizing, the benefit of getting into the dual use space, because those contracts are lucrative, but also there's this, I don't want to say renewed patriotism, but there's, when you develop a system for the DoD, it's not always facing some sort of attack piece, right? There's a lot of other uses and things like that aren't just made for, showing of strength. And so I think a lot of our companies understand that. We help them understand that. We've leaned into the dual use side. We have a creator with the Army Ground Vehicle Services Group out of Warren, Michigan. We're very supportive of, a lot of that, the work that's going on, because we see it as, kind of critical to national security. But again, you're not going to please everybody, right? There's always going to be some talent that doesn't want to work for a company because they have a view that I don't want to work with a company that does anything on the defense side. It's a little naive to think a mega, with the hyperscalers aren't going to work on the defense side just because of who they are. And that's all right. That talent can go find jobs other places. But at the same side, some of our companies, they have, strict mandates that they're not going to work, on the defense, and that's fine. That's a choice they're making. But, ultimately for us, we see, the federal government, whether it's the DoD, the DOE, and a lot of the other three-letter, agencies and groups as, partners. They're some of our best companies, have been founded and funded, by, these types of grants, right? They wouldn't have got the cash otherwise to survive.
Take us through a good example of some of your winners, for lack of a better term. What does a best case scenario look like from partnering with Centropolis?
Yeah, so I mentioned a company earlier, Merrill Solutions or Merrill Power Solutions. So they're that early stage, power inverter stack, and we help them actually with some of their design for manufacturing. How do you actually create this package system and produce it at scale? So when we started working with them, they had a lot of interest from a lot of the OEMs and the tier ones, but they needed, some capacity and engineering support so that they actually could deploy these prototypes to start winning contracts. But a good example of Merrill, so they have that success with the tier ones. And so their technology is now built into auto inverters with Continental that are making their work way into Ford, or working with other inverters in the marine and aqua space, all the way to charger inverters. So now their technology is working in the EV charging space, all the way to the drone manufacturers like Blue Flight, which is another portfolio company. So what started out as one company, what we saw with a critical technology that could now be embedded with other portfolio companies of ours, and then others in our ecosystem, we started seeing them win contracts, and now they're giving our other companies a competitive advantage where every other EV charging manufacturer, there's a million of them. Now this company that we're working with has a competitive advantage because of the power conversion ratio and the packaging size. So that's a really great example of a win. Another one would be like Niron Magnetics out of Minnesota, which is a company using non-earth materials for magnets. And so we're working with them to build their magnets into Eaton motors, which, are going downstream into a lot of the tier ones and the defense side. And then the same thing, working with them and their magnets going into companies, like I mentioned before, Modal Motors, which has a motor design that's using non-rare earth magnets. And that's moving into drone manufacturing, like our companies like Blue Flight, all the way to groups like Metal Ops and others who are potentially using these for VTOLs or other advanced motor design systems. So those are two examples of companies that were investing in like the component or the subsystem scale, system scale. And then now we're being able to deploy that across the ecosystem. Those are just two small examples.
Does that sort of integration happen organically, or to use your drone motor example, is it something where you guys are out scouting, saying, all right, we see a missing piece that could work into the network of both our partners and our portcos, let's go find them?
Yeah, so when we go through our due diligence process, right, it's just a little unique. We create this fund. I created it when I joined, but we have a supply chain risk, we have a manufacturing risk, a product assessment, and what we also do is kind of a market map of landscape map of potential customers. So we're very intentional, and we look at a company and we say, okay, this technology, does it fit gaps we know that our corporate partners have, like our large enterprises, and then also the other companies we're working with. So, I mentioned the kind of 3 or 4 verticals we're really deep in. We, a lot of times, are intentionally looking out at companies that are best in class to fill those gaps. Some are going to happen or more organically, but we try to be very intentional about the companies we bring in the portfolio, because we can see if they're successful, okay, here's all the immediate impact they can have on either portfolio companies or our industry partners.
How should people reach out to you? Who should reach out to you? When is the right time to look at Centropolis and say, hey, we think we have something, but we need to figure out some help getting to scale? Like, who are you looking for right now?
So we're really perfect for those founders that, kind of match our hard tech thesis across some of those verticals I mentioned, right? So whether you're looking at industrial optimization and kind of decarbonization, Industry 4.0, advanced manufacturing robotics, that defense tech, where we're looking at powered electronics and kind of subsystem advanced materials innovation, and then on the mobility space, all things energy transition, electrification. But more importantly, you have alpha beta prototypes, right? So you're a lot of times working with companies we call that TRL, like level 3 to 4, where they've got a unit, they've got something produced, and they're looking to get into the field trials, right? They're starting to probably raise their pre-seed seed round, and they need help developing a more full-throated, fully featured prototype that they can then put in front of customers or put out into the field to get more feedback. They've got some market traction, maybe some letters of intent, letters of support, and maybe have won some grants before. Where we're not a good fit for founders is, when you're back of the napkin kind of idea stage, or maybe you're just raised your like family and friends round to kind of get your idea off the ground. That's probably not the best time for us to talk to you. Where we really, kind of really go all in is in that seed stage where we can help those companies de-risk their technical milestones and get to that next stage for everybody.
People are really thinking about, how do we build drones at scale? What are some other component level powered electronics that Centropolis is looking at, saying we don't have enough of these within the Western Hemisphere supply chain?
I mean, when it comes to motor design, right, anything, essentially electric motor, of all, kind of shapes and sizes. And then you get into the kind of those subsystem assemblies and microcontrollers all the way to flight controllers, any MCU, ACU type of components. Like those are the things that we're looking at to say, hey, can you develop those locally, right? You get into inverter stacks, power conversion stacks, silicon carbide materials, thermal, more emissive materials to increase thermal transfer so we can make things smaller. Next generation, whether it be GaN or other types of technologies to improve that conversion and reduce packaging size. Those are things that are interesting to us. And then one piece that I'm particularly interested in because of my background here at Western Michigan University is we do a lot in printed electronics and flexible electronics. So what could that look like, from an advanced sensor perspective and packaging, if we can reduce, kind of or reinvent how those systems are actually embedded inside of, consumer electronics or commercial electronics, right? If you're not actually having to print on an actual PCB, right? Your PCB is now a flexible material. What does that change, for the design and engineering of some products?
So people should just email you if they have a napkin sketch of a good idea.
We do have earlier stage programming, but I'll direct them. I'll refer them to somebody else to handle those problems.
And especially if they're very political on social accounts and oppose, reindustrialization. And
exactly.
America.
If you want to outsource everything.
When you are looking at a company, especially largely in your sector, going to be engineering led, how much do you go out and look at their social?
I can honestly say it really hasn't been a big part of what we do, the due diligence side. A lot of it, because when we work with companies, we're talking and doing due diligence, and I'm talking from a referral perspective. What we look at from an investor side at a company is like, okay, has the team, is our multi-time founders, do they have a history of execution? If they don't, what are their credentials and background? And so because a lot of ours is so in the high sciences and a lot of like very, let's say multi-time founders, it really doesn't come into play. Like we've, for the most part, stayed out of kind of that El Segundo Twitter manufacturing space. Not because like we don't think there's a lot of cool technology out there. It's because they like never come over here. All right. We had an event, where, here in Michigan, where I like to joke was like the flyovers are the coast flew into the flyover state and forgot to tell us they were coming. And, it was a lot of like great, kind of, awareness building, for what the capabilities of the Midwest are, because we've been building hard, essentially hard shit forever. And we're really good at it. And so we want to collaborate. We've got a lot of great partners on the coast, like, the engine over at MIT and RA Capital out in Boston, and, Schematic Ventures out in San Francisco, Ally Robotics. So, I think I would say the cream of the crop, we all kind of like work together, even like Eclipse VC, right? Had a good conversation with them recently, and they've invested in a ton of really early stage deep tech and hard tech. And all of them are ex-operators at some of the best manufacturing and or like, product-led companies, whether it be like space. Some of them are ex-SpaceX and Tesla. Some are ex-GE and Boeing. And they have, $7 billion under management. All right. So, and people don't really associate them with reindustrialization, but they probably know more about it than any other VC I've ever met.
I'm certainly not trying to, kick off an East Coast, West Coast, Mid Coast, battle.
Yeah.
Both sides have stuff to learn from each other.
100%.
And if we are going to reindustrialize the country, it cannot be either or. It's going to have to be both. There's just too much work to be done, and there's too much practical knowledge on both sides. That tension has to be resolved.
It's all hands on deck. And, we've found great collaborators all over the country. And, same thing is we've seen a lot of more investment and, more interest, coming here stateside. And even, some of our international friends, right, are looking at, the Midwest as a landing hub for industrialization, like Japanese Trade Organization, Business Finland, some of the other Nordic countries. We've attracted a number of businesses to Detroit from Turkey and Israel and Norway that have relocated their headquarters because of business we've won them, which is great.
Phil Swanson from the Centrepolis Accelerator. We will talk soon.
Awesome, Joel, Alex, great chatting with you, and hopefully it stays a little warmer in Las Vegas than it is here today. I'm supposed to get 12 inches of snow tonight, so.
That is not how you sell Michigan to other people.
No,
Don't land there.
It's wonderful. It's sunshine, rainbows, and unicorns all year long.